There is a big distinction to be made between what happens to us without us and what begins with us. What happens to us without us, good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, criminal or holy, war or magnificent spectacles, all of this is the work of God. Being the work of God, it is the word of God to me, because God speaks personally with each of us. Everything is a spectacle that God presents to us, so it is a language. However, the language must be understood. So we can make the mistake of considering this scene in itself separate from God, or we can make the mistake of interpreting this scene according to our thought, according to our intention, and that's just as bad. If on the contrary we bring this scene to God and understand it in the thought of God, that is correct, for this scene, being creation of God, must be understood according to the author. Everything must be understood according to the mind of the one who does it. We cannot listen to God's words and understand them the way we want to, no. We must seek their meaning in God, because each word can be covered with a different thought. This is why we must seek the thought of him who speaks it. If everything is creation of God, everything is understood correctly only if it is understood in the thought of God. Behold, whatever happens to us without us must be welcomed by God. And each our word must start from God, and must not start in an autonomous way, that is to say from our feelings, our impressions or our previous experiences, because what comes from us and not from God, takes God away from us, separates us from God, creates a divide. And it is a fracture that we can no longer recover. In fact, if Christ does not come to die in us, we alone cannot recover the principle, because what begins with us dominates us, fascinates us and makes us live for it. In other words, we can no longer surpass ourselves, because to overcome the thought of ourselves we need another. But to have the other present, we have to go beyond ourselves, the circle closes and we never leave it. In order to free ourselves from our products, we have to overcome our ego thinking, but we alone cannot overcome our ego thinking. To overcome the thought of our ego, we need another. But to reach the presence of the other, we have to overcome the thought of ourselves, otherwise, we do not see the other and the circle closes. That is to say, to overcome the thought of myself, I need the other. It is only to the extent that another appears to me and becomes an object of love, that I have the possibility of overcoming the thought of myself. So, to see the other, I have to overcome the thought of myself, otherwise, I don't see the other. That is, even if I see men, creatures, bodies, I see them with the thought of my ego. Once the divide between God and me is created, at some point all of creation is clothed with my ego thought, that is to say that at a certain moment I am so imprisoned that everything becomes a mirror of myself, of my ego, a product of my ego and nothing else, because they are signals and signals can be covered with intention. When all creation is clothed with my intention, I never leave it. So, who will deliver me from this body, from this closed circle? Only the presence of God, but the presence of God entering into this closed circle and thus taking shape, behold, only the incarnate Word can free me, break the circle. Commentary by Luigi Bracco on the Gospel of St. John. February 26, 1983.